Welcome to the Orange Hammer Podcast. My name is Corbett Storick. I've been a licensed general contractor for 8+ years, specializing in new construction, renovation, furniture building. I'm the son of an architect and an interior designer, and I've been surrounded in this industry since birth, watching all aspects from concept, design, build, punch list, and of course, all the problems that come up in between. In my time in Durham, North Carolina, I've noticed a significant gap in knowledge between homeowners who need work and the people who do the work. On this podcast, I hope to break down the process of homeownership from the perspective of both the homeowner and the contractor in an effort to help raise the knowledge of homeowners about their homes and the construction/renovation process. I hope you enjoy. If you're enjoying the Orange Hammer Podcast, or if you have a topic that you want covered, or have recently done a project, please contact the Orange Hammer Podcast. The Orange Hammer Podcast is on Instagram and Facebook. Please like and subscribe, share on whatever platform you're enjoying your podcast on. Also, check out our YouTube channel, The Orange Hammer. The Orange Hammer Podcast is proud to be brought to you by CRS Contracting LLC for all your construction and handyman needs, new buildings to renovations, furniture building, EV charger install, or even a TV mounted. You can call me, Corbett Storick. It'd be my pleasure to help you. You can find me on Instagram at CRS Contracting. WSDG, the Walter Storick Design Group, specialists in architectural and acoustical consulting. Check out WSDG.com. And Taylor Bragg, for all your artistic needs in all mediums. You can find her on Instagram at brag_about_art. That's brag, BRGG, with 2 G's. She's the fantastic artist behind the Orange Hammer logo, and she did my fantastic table painting of my podcasting table. The Orange Hammer Podcast is proud to be brought to you by Stacy Sloan with Keller Williams Elite Realty, proudly serving the Durham and Triangle area for 25 years. Call Stacy at 919-972-1180. The Orange Hammer Podcast is proud to be brought to you by Rachel Z with Rachel Z Real Estate Team Realty. From the Triangle to the Triad, call Rachel Z at 919-323-6068. Welcome, everybody, to episode 103. Very excited to be in the hundreds of the Orange Hammer Podcast. Today, good friend and neighbor Alex Ramsey is in the house. Alex, how you doing this morning?
Good. Feeling
Nice.
good.
Really glad to have you down here. I know it's a quasi-sad because you're, in fact, moving away.
That's
but
right.
It does lead to some really fantastic conversations for us to have for listeners. So let's just dive right in. So you're correct me, obviously, but for just tiny recap, you're from the Maryland, Baltimore area.
Yeah.
And then personal things that we don't really need to dive into that are irrelevant caused you to move down to the Durham area, to
Yes.
Durham specifically.
Correct.
And that was approximately 13, 14 months ago.
Yes.
And you bought a Durham building company, 4-bedroom, 3-bath, 2-story, detached 2-car garage on technically 3/4 of an acre, but also technically half acre with a 1/4 acre separate but attached, but bought all as one package.
Correct.
Okay. So those are kind of like the basest big details. So what a time, calendar year wise, to buy a house. Possibly, we're similar in age, so most likely the highest interest rates of our life, definitely the highest interest rates of our adult life, where we'd be thinking about buying a house. So what kind of numbers were we looking at here? What was your interest rate? How much money did you put down? What was the listing price of the house? What did you end up buying it for? Walk me through some of the details of that.
Yeah.
house.
I mean, the whole thing was pretty crazy. I bought it for $440, and I put about $70,000 down, so just under 20% down. And then made some minimal, my interest rate was 6.5%. And that made the payment, the mortgage on a 30-year conventional, something around the lines of $2,500 a month.
Okay. So for comparison for listeners, I bought my house 10 to 11 years ago. Now we will be clear. Square footage, 2,000?
Yeah, just under 2,000.
Okay, so let's be clear. I'm missing a whole bedroom and a whole bathroom. But more or less
Similar.
We have like 2-car garage.
Right.
Similar, like I'm missing the square footage of that. I'm at 1,600, something like that.
Right.
So 16 to 2, that's the bedroom and the bath. But with the exception of that, basically the same thing.
Pretty similar setup.
Pretty similar setup. 11 years ago,
Right.
170 listing, bought for 175.
Right.
10 over 30, rather conventional mortgage, $640 a month
Yes.
mortgage payment. I refied into a 15-year fixed, still at 3.25 with an $850 a month mortgage payment, and I pay $900 on auto pay to just kind of nick that interest down. So in just 10 short years, 10 short years, look at the difference.
Well, and even the crazier thing is I just sold it.
Well, let's get there later.
Right.
Yeah, we'll get into those numbers. But just, okay, so a couple of questions. The 440, was listing or what you paid?
The builder listed it like 450, and then they dropped it to 440, and then on top of that, they provided a $10,000 incentive. I took the incentive money and put it towards a 2-1 buy down on the interest rate. So my interest rate for the first year was technically 4.5, and then the second year was 5.5.
Right. But that is, granted, like that's real money that you didn't pay, but it's almost a cruel trick.
It is.
Because a year later, if you didn't adjust your circumstance, all of a sudden your mortgage payment is just $1,000 more.
It would have been closer to $3,000.
Oh, so it would have been $500 more.
Yeah, sure.
But again, if you don't adjust your circumstances or didn't know in the first place that you could handle that,
right,
your potential to shoot yourself in the foot is there.
Sure.
Yeah. Now, did you okay, we'll get into some life changes later on, but before the life changes happened, were you like, I can handle the higher payment? I knew that already.
Yeah, I mean, I figured I would be doing pretty well in my job, and I calculated in, to what my budget would be given my income, and I think I figured it would be something that I could swing, or hoping that I'd be able to refinance in time.
Okay. So refinance was definitely on the brain.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So my next question is more of a personal question. It's a big house. It's a lot of house for one dude and a dog. What was it just like when you saw it, it spoke to you? Was there, the deal was too good? Was life circumstance we don't have to dive into the reason you just were like, I need to buy a home and renting an apartment is not in my purview?
Yeah.
Were you like, oh, this is step one, and in 5 months I meet my dream girl, even though you hadn't met her yet? Like, what? It's a lot of house.
I was hoping to be able to kind of grow into it.
Okay.
I was thinking I'd meet somebody down here. That didn't happen. So
you met me.
I met you. Yeah. Oh, it's been great.
I can't help you fill a house,
though. Can't move in with me.
No. I need my podcast space.
No, I figured I could grow into it. I also figured that when I saw it and I saw the way that it was constructed and I saw the lot compared to the one next to it, and then I saw the garage and everything, I really just liked the layout. I really liked the way it was constructed. I thought it was very quality. It was pretty well built house.
I would say that it was perfectly built. All of the, and this is me like picking on you as a friend, all of the complaints that you would ever tell me, I was like, that's not a real issue. That's just like you wish it was better.
Yeah.
But that's not like somebody cheated you.
No, and all the finishes are really nice. Like so like Durham Building Company is local here, and Maggie Tackett was the sales, representative, and so she's part of that company, and I think they do a really good job of like picking paint and picking, the kitchen is beautiful, the flooring, I like the flooring that it was actually
they're
the
like
LVP.
Design style.
Yeah, they did
quality.
hardwood on the stairs, which is nice. They did like, nice trim, large format trim. So I just walked into it and I just fell in love with it, honestly. And it probably was more of an emotional decision than anything else. But I also was looking at the surrounding area and going, you know what? I have a good gut feeling that this is going to appreciate in value. And I would, and if I ended up not staying here, it would be a decent move to just buy it, live in it for however long it would suit me and my needs and my pup's needs, you know, and then we'd be able to, you know, make our next life change.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, the inflection in your voice is that you're like shitting on yourself for making an emotional decision. That's 95% of house buying is an emotional decision.
Sure.
So I don't know if you should. I think you should not be hard on yourself at all. It's just if you are. Yeah, I mean, emotion can sometimes trump the reason when you see something stunning. You know, like, oh my God, look at this kitchen.
Well, I got a lot out of it too. Like, I think I got a lot of life experience out of it that an apartment just wouldn't have been able to provide. Like,
well, all the little things you tinkered with, you can't do when you're renting. So, let's jump into that list. Sure. So, right off the top of the bat, you cut 20 holes in the wall and ran Cat 6 everywhere.
Yeah, I ran Ethernet through the house, ran security cameras. And yeah.
So, Ethernet. That's an interesting conversation because for somebody like me, I'm almost like not needed. For somebody like you, arguably not needed, but definitely just freaking wanted. End of conversation. I want it, and I'm Alex, and I know how to cut a hole in a drywall, put it back, and patch a hole in the drywall. Like, not that complicated. You're not the average homeowner. The average homeowner is like, patch drywall? What? You mean an eye patch? Like, what are you talking about? I need a professional. Like, and then you know, it's $20 million according to you. Every time we talked about how much something cost, you'd be like, what's that cost? $25,000? I'm like, more like $4,000. What are you talking about?
That's my joke
funny.
From being so jaded about the DC metro area. Growing up in that area, it's just everything is just inflated.
Yeah, well, you know, it's a massive city, and you got to pay for higher insurance, and your contractor has a higher rent and a higher mortgage, and this, that, and the third, and it's just like, nope, it's not $25,000, it's $5,000.
Right.
But so other than the cat and the security cameras, I don't remember much else. So what else? What else?
I mean, eventually I built a fence.
Oh yeah, you fenced in the yard for the pup.
Yeah, we did a big fence. And then I also
the most overbuilt, over-engineered fence on the planet. This is what happens when a computer engineer
builds a fence.
It's
like hurricane rated.
And he meets a contractor who goes, "You're going over the top," and you go, "I don't care."
The posts are 3 feet in the ground. I used the Simpson strong tie fence brackets. I used deck screws, galvanized deck screws on everything.
Yeah, if anybody's listening, this is as overkill as it gets.
6x6s on the end, and one in the middle at least every like 30 feet. I think I did a 6x6.
Just because you felt like it?
Well, because they're nice. 6x6s are nice. They do not move. When you get those things in the ground, they don't move at all.
You know what else doesn't move once they're in the ground? 4x4s.
No, they do. They jiggle.
They don't.
They jiggle.
Not if you put them in the ground correctly.
I did. I put them in the ground, and they still jiggle a little bit.
You probably didn't put them in correctly.
150 pounds of concrete on each one.
I'm just saying. My fence posts don't wiggle when I put them in the ground.
How much concrete are you putting in there?
So, usually a 4x4 fence post will get 2 bags.
2 60-pound bags.
So 2 60-pound bags is 120 pounds of cement.
But
there's also like, I'm doing maybe 2 inches of gravel beneath the post. And then by design, the cement does not fill the hole, and you put 2-3 inches of dirt back on top. Right. So when like you look at the finished post, it just looks like it's in dirt, but it's actually in cement inside. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't really have to do a lot to that house. I put appliances in. The builder had selections, but I didn't like them, so they wanted to do all Samsung, and I was like, no. So I did, my own kind of higher end appliances, and then laundry, and then. But other than that, like, I really didn't have to do a lot. It was like move-in ready. It let me kind of do my job and focus on my job.
And I mean, you were spread out. I mean, you had the master you were sleeping in.
Yeah.
You had a full guest room.
Yeah.
You had a full office, a full downstairs office.
I had 2 offices.
Your kitchen was open and huge and not used. You had a
Right.
dining room table that was just empty. You had a living room you never sat in because you're not a TV guy.
Right.
And your garage was slammed. I mean, you
The
had
garage was slammed.
workout equipment, a BMW, tools as if you were a builder, but you are not. It was hysterical. And I remember first meeting you, I was like, "Are you in the industry?" And you were like, "Well, I was sort of adjacent, kind of in a previous life."
Yeah.
So let's talk right about
I just
that.
like
Perfect
tools.
segue.
I like tools.
I like tools too. Yeah. I have an excuse to like tools.
Yes.
You're just like, I want to burn money. Let's buy an
Yeah,
SDS
let's do it.
Plus.
Let's do it.
Okay, so for listeners, this dude comes back in town, and he doesn't need to even own this tool, let alone use it. And it's now 10 o'clock at night. We're watching a movie. I can't even remember. And this dude is standing like antsy. And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, I really want to show you this thing I bought.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, I don't know, like, what are you talking about? And he's like, come on, just you want to go look at tools? And I was like, just bring it inside, whatever it is. This dude pulls out a roto hammer. It's just like the standard DeWalt battery-powered roto hammer
so excited.
that you, like, drill holes in cement with. And I'm just like, that's cool. He's clearly disappointed. I'm not, like, super excited about it.
cheesed.
And I'm like, dude, we literally used my identical roto hammer together to build a rail. There is a video on
I watched
YouTube.
you use it, and I was like, I really want one of those.
I was like, how do you expect me to be excited? This is just
so
a drill.
nice to have one. You can do so many different things. You can get these bits, the SDS Plus bits, and you can put all the kinds of stuff, chisels, and like you can break concrete, drill into concrete.
Yeah.
You know.
And then we used it yesterday.
Yeah.
So tell everybody what we did yesterday.
Well, so the punch list came back, which was hilarious.
Or I'm sorry, I'm going
to
to cut you off. Sorry. We're going to tell this story in a second after we say that you're selling your house.
Right.
Right. So 13 months later, mostly because of being let
I
go.
got let go at my job.
Yeah.
It wasn't really working out. They just were trying to break into IoT, but they couldn't sell. And I think that market is kind of struggling. Or if you're not like in controls, you don't have an established business, it's not really working out.
Okay, so you did air quality for a car company.
Yes, we did. We were tracking the filter banks, air particulate, and the pressure across the filter banks as they were functioning in manufacturing for automotive, but among other things. And it was just really difficult because it's such an expensive product to develop, and I think the technology is still so new in terms of sensors.
Now, the product to
for air
develop,
quality.
quote unquote, the sensor or the paint that they're using? What's the problem?
The sensor.
The sensor.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, I mean, they were really trying to break into anywhere they could, you know, in terms of like air quality and filtration. And I think that just that market's difficult to get into unless you're already like in a mechanical contractor or an HVAC contractor or something like that.
And I would assume that, like, you know, a larger unnamed company that we won't say has their own in-house people that are doing this.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of competition. One of the aspects of my job as a product owner was to look at the competition, and I did that with my boss, and we really were realizing that these bigger companies like Siemens and Johnson Controls, they had such a strong hold on the market. You know, they were like already embedded, especially like we would go to a hospital, and hospitals make significant capital expenditure, like, you know, when they first build the hospital to integrate these huge systems that manage the controls, which are basically lighting, security, HVAC, all
Probably
the critical electrical, critical plumbing, everything involved with like running gas to the ER, like through the walls, everything.
Yeah, all the guts of the building.
Yeah, and all of that is managed by building automation systems. So like if you're a separate company and you come in, you're like, hey, we can sell you filters and we can improve your filtration capacity. They're kind of staring at you like, I already have all that, you know, built into my BAS, and it's not easy to augment or cheap to augment. And by the way, we don't have the budget. You know, like, so unfortunately, I think everybody really cares a lot about air quality, but they care about air quality as much as they care about it, like they care like recycling.
Right.
It's an important thing for us to do, and it's an important thing for us to consider. But when it comes to making the yearly budget, it's on the lowest rung of the totem pole in terms of like prioritization.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, like, when asked about, everybody agrees. Like, oh, yeah, air should be clean and quality, whatever. But when you ask somebody, like, when's the last time you changed your air filter? Like, when you come over to my house, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I forgot, right.
Yeah.
Well, and so, but, you know, it's also just a commodity. A filter is a commodity.
Yeah.
And
but
so
also, like, the air quality will kill you in 60 years.
Sure.
Unlike the something that'll kill you by hitting you in the face. Like, that, we worry about that more than just like, the particulates in your air might cause you a disease.
I think, like, the biggest thing I saw as what could have been the biggest driver of value would be to be able to detect in real time, you know, pathogens and disease or something like that. But that's impossible. Right. You have to do laboratory analysis in order to get that kind of information.
That would just cost so much.
Costs
money.
A lot of money. You have
a lot of time.
You have to have a lot of sampling, and then the efficacy of the testing isn't, you know, still not really a lot's known. And I even saw that in the mold and asbestos remediation business, which we'll get to.
Well, let's jump right into that. So before I met you, when you were in DC, can I say it was your father's company, or do we edit that out?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so your father started a great company that was basically removing mold and telling you the next people you need to hire to fix it, because you guys weren't really, you would cut out the stuff, but you weren't, or were you?
So
if they wanted to pay for it.
Well, back in, like, what happened was, I guess my parents started this contracting business together. My mom started doing radon testing. And my grandfather actually, like, co-invented what's called the E-perm, which was like one of the original radon testing capsules. That was used through the 90s for, like, most home inspections.
So is it not the same silver box on a tripod you see today?
No, everything's been modernized.
Okay.
Yeah, but they started doing radon tests, like my mom started doing, as a side hustle. And then I think my dad actually got laid off. He was in biomedical engineering, and he got laid off from his job. And then, like, somewhere around the Kuwait War or something like that, I don't know, 1990, 2 years before I was born. And then they decided to go full time with the radon biz, and they were just slinging radon tests, running around, driving all over the place, setting them, collecting them, analyzing, sending reports. And then it evolved into my dad doing lead paint testing, which was huge in homes around DC, like older homes. And then
you got much older homes, and nobody knew.
Right. And then eventually asbestos. And then year 2000 came, and it was like the mold became a big issue. And still continues to be something that he just does inspections. So he started doing remediation work, I'd say, like in the early 2000s. And then I came into the business. I kind of took a break from tech for some personal family reasons, and I stepped into the business myself around 2019, right before COVID hit.
So what does it look like day to day? Like, so you get a call, hey, we noticed some black spots in our bathroom, and you go over there, and you're like, okay, you visually, I would say, I'm guessing, 80% of the time you know what's going on just by looking at it.
Sure.
And you're like, okay, there's probably a very, very minuscule drip of a pipe behind this wall causing mold to be on the inside of the sheetrock, and now it's on the outside of the sheetrock, and you can get paid an absurd amount of money to cut that moldy piece out till there's no more mold. You look inside and go, there's the leaking pipe, call a plumber. Or are you the plumber? Like, how? Like,
we would, well, a lot of it was spurred by real estate transactions. So a lot of times it's something where a real estate agent calls us, and then there's maybe a deal hung up where a house is under contract, and then they went through the inspection period. The home inspector found something, and then they usually refer to us, and then we would come in, and that's our specialization would be. And for a while we were doing all of it. We were doing mold, asbestos, lead paint, and then crawl spaces was like its own whole topic. HVAC became its own whole topic. So we were starting to work with a network of other contractors, plumbers, HVAC people who were able to help, in these more complicated scenarios in older homes.
So you would effectively be acting as a GC.
Yes.
To be like, okay, we got called to deal with the mold. We took out the mold and discovered a rotted board needs to be fixed by my framing friend. A pipe is leaking. Call the plumber friend. Call the sheetrocker when it's all done. Call the painter when he's done. And we can turnkey this for you, even though you were not licensed.
Depending
GCs.
on we have a Maryland Home Improvement Contractor's license.
Okay.
And
you never
insurance.
told me that.
Yeah, we have full license to do like up to I think around $1 million. Project size. So similar to what you.
I have the same. I have the $1 million. It's in North Carolina. That's the lowest one.
We just held special liability insurance specifically for mold. Asbestos and mold, which costs a lot more money. But we always tried to be really just honest with people. And we always tried to be straightforward with them to the extent that we could, maybe kind of ease some of the concerns and put people on like the right track in terms of through their home buying process. Cause obviously we were just talking about it's stressful. Yeah. And the DC market is even crazier. I'm sure. I witnessed all of that. So I've inspected probably 1,500 homes, for mold and asbestos or sometimes both, sometimes you have mold growing on the asbestos, which is really fun.
Right.
But, we'd come in and we usually like a home inspector would spot something. I could tell you the most common things I saw. A lot of the most common things were subgrade in basements. Basements are really popular in DC, Maryland, Virginia. And so you'd go into a certain neighborhood and just depending on the water table that's around, there'd be a lot of pressure being put on the foundation walls. And usually there'd be a lot of what's called efflorescence. And efflorescence is just mineral deposits that are moving through the brick very slowly over time and basically salts.
So for listeners who don't know what he's talking about, if you ever go into a crawl space where the insulation is in the floor above you, or when you're standing in the crawl space, it will feel like the ceiling. If you look on your foundation walls, whether it's brick, cement block or old-fashioned legitimate stones, it's irrelevant. But if you happen to see basically a white, shiny covering, it's millimeters thin. It's not thick at all, but it'll be like this shiny white. It'll look like crystals, like mineral. Yes. It'll literally look like mineral deposits because guess what? Alex just said it. It is, in fact, minerals. So something, water or air, most likely water, is either getting through or seeping through, and it's a lack of waterproofing on the outside of your foundation, and that's a dead giveaway that you have a moisture problem in your crawl space.
Well, yeah, and I mean, we would get a call for that like every single day, and it really depended on the scenario. A lot of times, we would just try to educate people about what the difference is. Sometimes there was mold involved with that scenario. In other words, it would be in the form of the dust that had settled on the surface of the block over time, and then due to high relative humidity, just activating that dust and becoming mold food. Yeah. So
we see a lot of that in North Carolina. It's a very humid state.
Yeah, and the prescription of the problem is, put some air controls in, a fan that evacuates the air, get a nice dehumidifier, dry the space out, scrape everything off, and apply a sealant, and then figure out what the source of the problem was. Usually is downspouts.
Yes,
downspouts
are a huge one.
Always at the corners of a house, and the corners of the house are really the most vulnerable part of the foundation wall because that's where you have two different things coming together. And so when you have a downspout there, all that water is just slamming it. And if you don't have an extension on the downspout or the downspout gets clogged, then you've got all that water just settling out at that corner of the foundation.
I could not agree with you more if you were paying me. Like, it is so crucial. And most of the time, the code only requires like that stupid little plastic splash guard thing or a 4 feet of black corrugated pipe. And I'm telling you right now, listeners, spend the $1,500 to get your downspouts connected to white, solid PVC pipe that you can't crush with a car, and run them all together, link them to a T, and run them all to daylight. And if you don't know what daylight means, call me, and I'll tell you how to do this. And by the time 3 months later of grass seed pops up over where we buried it, you'll never know anything happened. You'll have one little clean out in case it gets clogged with pine needles for a plumber to snake, and you just won't have water issues again.
Usually we would terminate them. Sometimes we terminate them to what's called a catch basin.
Yeah.
Catch basin is just something that you bury. It's just a bucket in the ground that you have put a hole over.
Or a dry well we do here,
right?
Which is just basically a pile of rocks.
The reason we did a lot of catch basins, a lot of that in Maryland and DC, because the lots, basically people would be fighting over, neighbors would be fighting each other in DC, Bethesda, Potomac, all these areas where the lots are like maybe 10,000 square foot lots. They're all just fighting where the water's going.
Yep.
Because if it doesn't go in your basement, it's probably going to go in your neighbor's basement.
So I don't know about where you're talking about, but here, at least in the city of Durham, because I've run into this in the city and the outside. In the outside, it's not a law, but in the city of Durham, you can't dump your gutter water to your neighbor's property. There's like a legitimate code. So if your downspout is just like facing your neighbor and it's just gushing, you graded correctly, but it's just going through and onto their land, you're going to get in a lot of trouble, and you have to figure that out.
Yeah,
we do it for every rental property. We run both, actually. We do both downspout solid pipe, and then we do corrugated foundation drain. Not corrugated, I'm sorry, perforated. Corrugated is that black pipe that has it looks like it expands like a bendy straw.
Right.
Perforated means it's got holes.
Right.
But it's still a solid white PVC pipe that's not crushable.
The corrugated stuff isn't good because it collects everything that comes down the gutter, which is usually a lot of mud, and then it gets trapped in those corrugations, and then it basically fills up over time.
They're also crushable.
Yeah, well,
the first truck.
I've also seen them expand. So you get enough mud and moisture, and then in the wintertime, they don't get cleaned out because people forget about it. And then they expand because they ice up, and then it explodes the corrugation out.
Yeah.
And then they crack.
The true solution is white PVC and put a clean out.
Yep.
So that not if, but when they get full.
You have to do it. You have to do it seasonally. And people were always. Another thing we'd look at with gutters is the gutter helmets. So they have these gutter guards and gutter helmets. A lot of them are ineffective depending on the roof pitch.
Also depending on your vegetation.
The water would just shoot right off of the thing. It wouldn't even help.
Yeah. It would be like almost not having a gutter.
You'd still be collecting stuff on top of it. So you still have to clean off the top of the gutter guard. Otherwise, it becomes ineffective.
Yeah.
And then the next thing really would just be that was like kind of the most common scenario I saw. The next most common scenario was just literally high relative humidity in basements.
Before we jump into that, can we double back and talk about some of the solutions to that first problem? So obviously you got to get rid of whatever's built up. So if your vapor barrier is covered and stuff, you got to pull it out and put in a new vapor barrier. If your inside of your crawl space joists are covered in whatever, you got to spray them. If the walls are covered, you either have to scrape or spray, or probably both. And then there's a few options pending your budget and also how difficult the problem is to locate. So if it's clear that the water getting in is from your gutters, then we've already said it. Dig some pipes, get some PVC. If you really don't have a budget, at least put a 5-foot extension and figure out where the water is going to go and make sure it doesn't just pool and then circle back in another spot. So that's, but sometimes it's not that easy to find where the water's coming in.
Right.
So sometimes you got to hire my dudes from Wrangle Foundations to just dig a trench all the way around your foundation and waterproof it all the way from your siding down to your footer with roll-on waterproofer, and then go in with pipes and gravel and just make sure that 365 all directions, the water that hits your foundation goes down into a pipe and the pipe takes it away. Now that's all outside the foundation. Inside the foundation, beyond the cleaning we just mentioned, there's sub pumps for any water that gets in. Put the pump in the lowest point of the crawl space. The water rolls to the pump. You hook up a cord and a pipe, and it literally pumps it out. And you run that pipe out to the street, to a catch basin, to a dry well. It all depends on your geography. Here, it's pretty easy to just run a pipe to daylight, run it to the street where there's a stormwater drain. But in the 10,000 square foot lot, you've got to fight some people or figure out the location.
You get into row houses so a lot of row houses like in Northeast and Capitol Hill in Washington D.C., they have brick foundations that are like over 100 years old. And I remember just being able to take a screwdriver and just shove a screwdriver right through the mortar of these foundations. And they're so wet that they're just retaining the moisture. There's not really any practicable way to actually dry the foundation out.
Because you need to just screed over top that and get it. And screed is just like a thin layer of concrete mortar that you put on with like a big flat trowel and just make it look like smooth concrete. And then after that, you got to roll on tar waterproofing.
Yeah.
And then probably stucco it because it's going to look disgusting if you don't.
Yeah.
And then pipes and stuff.
My advice ultimately for a lot of those places were just don't go back and finish it again. A lot of people would go to finish a basement or finish a subgrade space, and then they wouldn't think about the waterproofing. And then a year later, they'd have to rip all of it out.
When you say finish, you mean like sheetrock, livable?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's dumb.
Yeah, and I basically got to the point where my advice for anybody inside of Washington, D.C. was treat any subgrade area like a swimming pool.
Treat it like a crawl space, not a basement.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah. You can try to live in it. Good luck. And they were renting these places out. Like, I'd go into these little apartments, and young folks like our age would be renting them out, like below a row house, for $1,500 a month, and they would be chock full of mold. Penicillium aspergillus being the most common mold group, which is basically only takes 55% relative humidity to grow.
Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about mold because I am not like a mold expert. I know what like growing mold looks like, and I know that 99.999% of the time it's really not that big a deal. Just cut it out and put new sheetrock, or if it's a lot of stuff, you just paint over it as long as you completely could seal it and it has no more air to breathe and grow. But it does seem to really scare a lot of uneducated people who don't realize that like the same mold spores, if not more, are just on your grass. They're just on your car. They're in the air everywhere all the time. Like it's not like there's no mold anywhere and we're creating these magical conditions for mold to grow in our house. It's really not the case. Like it's everywhere.
Yeah,
it's oxygen.
Absolutely.
It's literally everywhere.
That was part of like what I was talking about with our sort of education and counseling, as I might even call it. Sometimes I felt like more like a counselor, because I'd come in and buyers, young buyers who didn't really know anything about owning a house or buying a house.
Yeah, they're scared.
They're scared because it looks scary.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'd walk into scenarios where it was really bad.
Well, I'm sure.
And yeah, I mean, I would wear full suits and respirators and stuff. But there would be other scenarios that we would just call maintenance and cleaning scenarios, which are, and basically the determination there is dose response. So mold is an allergen. Mold is not something that is like a disease. It's just an allergen. It's just a spore in the air, and the spore activates or deactivates depending on the conditions. Spores are all around us. They're on every surface of everything in this room. They're in abundance outdoors.
At all times.
At all times.
Everywhere. Always.
That's part of life.
Yeah. Welcome to being a human.
Mold is everywhere.
Welcome to Earth.
Right.
Yeah.
It just depends on how it activates, and it also depends on the dose response. The dose meaning how much of it is activating on specifically building materials. So I've had scenarios where, people have had square inches of mold and they're like freaking out about that. And I just have to explain to them, well, it's such a small dosage of, such a small surface area that it really can't do much. But you go into a house where the 1,000 square feet of building materials in a basement are covered in mold.
That's a problem.
That's a problem where it starts to impact the upper floors simply because maybe an air handling unit is in the basement and it's pulling return air in and then supplying that moldy air through the rest of the house.
Just pushing it.
Then you're distributing
to grow.
Activated spores to what otherwise would be a dry space. So crawl spaces were a big deal in DC and Maryland because they always impacted the amount of moisture content in the air above, as well as the acceleration of mold spore growth and then pushing that through the rest of the house. So you have to make that determination. Is it really a practical determination of what am I looking at, how much surface area is involved, Color, people would always call us and be like, I have the black mold, right?
Guess what? All mold's black.
Well, it comes in all, I've seen it in a rainbow of colors, right? But it doesn't, black just basically means that it's in some sort of other, it's in a subspecies, and it's usually like something like Stachybotrys or Chaetomium, which are the most common. And those were like the most common dangerous molds associated with drywall. For whatever reason, drywall paper does a great job of growing Stachybotrys. It's like the best material for growing that kind of mold, and that kind of mold affects certain people. I think the only people that really need to be concerned about mold, when it's in a higher dosage and they're having to live around it and they can't mitigate it easily, is people that have predisposition to things, like if they're
like asthma
or any kind of
COPD,
respiratory stuff. And those are the people that really we would have concerns for. If you're young and you're relatively healthy, then actually being exposed to a normal dosage of things throughout your life is good.
Helps build the antibodies for your immune system.
It really does.
Yeah.
And I had people call me, and I did, I'd have parents who have these beautiful row houses fully redone, in Washington, D.C., or beautiful homes in Bethesda, and they want me to take air tests in their nursery. Their nursery is comes back at 0 spores per cubic meter. It's like, well, actually, there's 0 mold in here in the air. So you might actually want your baby to be exposed to a little bit of mold. Ironically, because when your baby's developing, the resistance to things, and
that immune response,
specifically allergens, right? So, you want to actually expose your baby to a certain amount of allergens so that their body gets used to them, and then when they grow older, it doesn't become a problem.
Right.
So,
yeah, I mean, if you spend your entire life in a clean room, you'll walk out to the real world, and your body that should have just developed a natural way to fight off just stuff in the air, all of a sudden you're going to get
that
very,
was
very
the most
sick.
Frustrating aspect for me in doing that job, was trying to explain to people that you're buying a 100-plus-year-old home. You cannot ever get it to the point where it's mold free.
New homes aren't
right
100%.
And then outside of that, just as you said, you go outside, and I did air tests, tons of air tests, which are called spore traps, throughout Washington, D.C., in alleyways and so forth.
Just random outside
spots.
Yeah,
because you have to take an outdoor as a reference. It's the only reference point you have to what the indoor is. And I would find massive concentrations of mold just outside of a house in an alleyway, and I'd find really what we would call mycotoxic mold that has a disposition to really affect people much more than other mold groups, to the tune of sometimes I would see 6,000 to 8,000 spores per cubic meter on a hot summer day, like June, July day, in an alleyway in DC. You got 10,000 spores per cubic meter just settled on the pavement. And this is crazy mold,
and this
not
is
good stuff.
100 feet from the house that they're worried about their baby.
Right.
So that would lead to some frustration then, where you're just really becoming like an educator of mold, just to try to be like, hey guys, I get that you don't want your baby to be sick. Nobody does.
Right.
I get that you don't enjoy looking at black spots in this 4-inch by 4-inch square next to your toilet. But also,
if you open
this is real life. Yeah, if you open the window once, it's all coming in.
You're exposing everything more than you even have the ability to have control over, because you've basically purchased a property that, by the way, is probably a minimum of $1 million.
But also, just go for a walk in the park,
right,
and you've
is in the middle of this. So it's kind of like, I started writing an article about it, and I basically chalked up the DC housing scenario to be something of like a public health emergency, because I was just running around.
Probably not a good move.
No, I mean, it really was true. And it wasn't good, because the affordability, there's no affordability. And then people don't really understand that when you buy like a 100-plus-year-old property, the only way to actually get it to be restored to be mold-free can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars and be incredibly complicated to do and incredibly stressful.
It's not cheap, and it's not easy, and it's very labor-intensive, because you can't just like run a
you can't run a bucket of an excavator along a crawl space. You got to dig it all by hand, or you'll nick the crawl space and like damage the house. It's not an option. You know, you can use an excavator with a bucket to dig the pathway from where the pipe around the crawl space is going to run to daylight or the street corner. You can run an excavator there real quick. But all of that, you got to dig sometimes 3-4 freaking feet down to the footer. You got to do that all by hand. You need 10 guys who are just with shovels. It's a lot of work.
I've done it.
Yeah. I've watched guys do it.
We've dug out crawl spaces where we had Home Depot buckets and we just created a train.
Yep.
To make room
assembly line
to be able to even get in there to even pull the insulation out and then treat everything and then, clean, treat, dry, and then come back once it's dry, put a new vapor barrier down, spray it out with antifungal sealant, and then put back usually with a closed cell foam.
The spray.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's an interesting segue to both a quick insulation chat and a crawl space sealed or unsealed chat. So the spray foam insulation, well, I guess quickly for listeners, insulation more or less comes in 4 forms. You've got the bats that have open one side, paper on another side. You press it in between studs and you staple the little paper tab to the side of each stud and you call it a day. It's usually pink. Sometimes it's white. Then there's hard, rigid foam board, and that you see people running along the outside of a foundation wall sometimes, or in their garage door, they'll cut and put pieces to insulate their garage door, or below cement slabs. They'll do like gravel and then sand and then a couple of layers of these pink boards, right? Then there's the, to go along with the bats, usually in the ceiling, they put the sheetrock up, and then they go and they spray in loose insulation with a giant, like 8-inch, hose, and they just spray in this loose shit, and it's awful and it's terrible, and you never want to go in your attic. And then the mecca, the most expensive and the most efficient, and in my opinion, the best, is spray foam, open or closed. Circumstances vary. And basically, 2 oil-looking drums each have a hose. The hose mixes at the nozzle. It looks like white spray paint. It has the consistency of syrup when it comes out, and in front of your eyes instantly, it expands to 70 times its size and fills every nook and cranny and gap. It explodes way past the studs, and then they come back with cool-looking saws that look like bush hedge trimmers, and they shave it flush with the stud, and you just have this perfectly packed, no gaps, bugs aren't getting through it, wires aren't moving, and in my opinion, is the move. You can spray it in the regular wall of the house. You can spray it on the roof deck of your attic. You can spray it in the floor of the foundation or along the foundation walls, and that's the perfect segue to crawl spaces, sealed or unsealed. Now, code-wise, I only know North Carolina code. Code-wise, both acceptable, but when you talk to both builders, actually all 3, builders, inspectors, and specifically the HVAC people, they are strongly recommending that you don't put in the little grates, that you just do a solid foundation wall. So you just do no grates. You pull those black plastic grates out, put in a solid brick, have it completely sealed, and then instead of spraying the spray foam in between the flooring joists upward above your head, you leave that open and you spray along the actual cinder block foundation walls with spray foam. And what that does is you're now conditioning the crawl space. This is more for listeners than for you. I apologize. But so initially you're like, wait a minute, I don't want to pay more money to heat and cool my crawl space. Okay, yes, technically you are adding square footage to how much juice your air conditioner needs to work. But the counterpoint of that is the thermal break. And for those who don't know what that means, that's where the conditioned air meets the outside. They are constantly fighting against each other. So if your thermal break is your floor versus your disgustingly cold or disgustingly hot and humid crawl space. That is actually fighting more than if you only have to fight against the earth, which is usually at a much more consistent temperature. And if it's inside your crawl space, will not get to that freeze point and really won't get above like 60 degrees to the touch. So you're actually fighting less during the season change, and it ends up being more efficient. And then again, in my opinion, and it seems to be the HVAC opinion, by conditioning the crawl space, you get two huge added benefits. One, your systems like water heater and air handler that would be normally stored in a crawl space that's not conditioned is now conditioned, meaning all of those systems will work both more efficiently and longer. And then also, you really, by conditioning, you really kind of eliminate a lot of humid fungal growth opportunities.
Yeah, so to clarify, our opinion, our strong opinion on that was that crawl spaces increasingly need to become sealed spaces. And when you say conditioned, we weren't of the opinion that your HVAC should actually have anything to do with your crawl space. A lot of times simply because the soil that we would encounter in the Maryland, like DC metro area, the pH would be whacked, like it'd be super high or super low, and the soil would oftentimes put off an odor. Even if it was like really well sealed, you'd be surprised.
So that odor would leach into the air handler and just be a weird smell.
A lot
in the
of
house.
times we would recommend isolating, like we've talked about this before, but like an HVAC system isn't engineered to be outside of the volume for which it's conditioning, right? So an HVAC is supposed to be inside of the building envelope.
90% of the time it's not. Like when it's in the attic, most of the time they haven't spray foamed the roof deck, so the insulation
by heat
in
and
the ceiling.
And we would see mold growing inside of ductwork in attics all the time because you'd get all this hot, humid air, and there's nothing. It couldn't go anywhere, and it would condense inside of the ductwork onto the dust.
Yeah,
and the dust would be a catalyst for mold. In the crawl space, what we would recommend doing is, totally sealing the vapor barrier, taking the vapor barrier all the way up the side of the foundation walls, and then just like you said, spray foaming over that to create an actual like glued seal. Like we would glue the vapor barrier to the walls.
It's the best way.
And then we would spray foam the rim joist. The rim joist is the section of wood between the base of the foundation wall and the start of the framing of the house. The rim joist is a lot of times where a lot of moisture comes through.
Yeah, because that piece of wood is really just bolted to cinder block, and they put this crappy little foam seal gasket, which is disappearing, luckily. They're now moving to this, it's a caulk gun, and it's basically like a super thick specialized silicone. Yeah. And now they're putting that down. And then
probably more effective than the little foam roll.
The foam roll that you press and it disintegrates. Yeah. It's like, okay, how did we think this was the smart move?
You can pluck it apart with your fingers.
Yeah. Whereas now you can run the sealant on the plywood. Right. It smooshes. It comes out the sides, and there's no air gap now.
Yeah. So I mean, on top of that, we would always recommend dehumidification. That's how we would recommend conditioning. So I agree, conditioning is correct, but I think the best thing to condition with is a dehumidifier, because then you're just always reducing the amount of humidity that's in the air in the crawl space. And that's what I did for my house down here. I sealed all those vents with foam, and then I put an industrial grade dehumidifier that has a pump built in, down there, and it changed the whole outlook of the way the rest of the house felt above, because the moisture moves up, heat rises, right? So with warm air holds moisture. And so as you increase in temperature, you increase for the capacity of moisture to be able to be held in the air.
Yeah. I was going to do that here, but every single time I went into my crawl space, it smelt fine and was bone dry. And I was like, okay, clearly the grading system on my house outside of the house.
And that's microclimate.
And also the my gutters
So
are buried and run off. So
people
like I
don't-
took some steps.
People don't think about that. Like microclimate is a thing, right? So we have climate, which is a broader thing, can be regional, but you actually have microclimates. And we would go into certain neighborhoods in Washington, D.C., and like the big thing in D.C. that separates Virginia from Maryland is the Potomac River. Potomac River is massive. And there would be these houses that are built in like Cabin John, for example. They're built like a mile from the Potomac River. The relative humidity in Cabin John is 10 to 20% higher any given day than it is 30 minutes up the road in Gaithersburg, Maryland. So the microclimate there challenges the homes in a lot of ways that you don't really pick up. You don't feel the difference, but it's enough to impact a space like a crawl space, huge, bigly.
So if you were building your own house, where would you put your systems? And I only ask because a lot of times when we redo a house, because that like I've got these rental properties, listeners know I've got these rental properties, this, that, and the third, blah, blah, blah. A lot of times we purposely will put, because again, we're spray foaming. So we're spray foaming the walls and we're spray foaming the roof deck. So that means the attic is conditioned space. It's going to get heated, air conditioned. It's not going to be, balls hot and full of mold.
Right.
So it's a perfect place to throw the air handler.
Yes.
You already have wood going from wall to wall in the form of rafter ties.
Right.
So a couple sheets of plywood nailed on top of those rafter ties. You got a beautiful platform.
Right.
More than enough room for guys to work, throw up an air handler, throw an extra light, throw an outlet for them to work. Put a note that says, as a tenant of mine, you're not allowed in the attic. You can't store stuff here. You can't trip on wires. You can't damage anything.
Well, if it's
conditioned,
if it's inside of the building envelope, then yes.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like that, to me, that's the move. And we also like to put granted, you lose the square footage, but we like to just put a water heater closet in the house, in the main floor of the house. Forget a crawl space door and whatever. Like if something you really need to get to the water heater, to get to that shutoff valve, it's right there.
Right.
It's across from the bathroom. There it is. It's in a closet. Sometimes we purposely build a barn door and paint it a fancy color so that it's like almost like a decoration. And then again, put in a light, put in an outlet, put it in a shelf. Just makes it easier for my plumber who's got to go there. This is me thinking as a landlord of just like the easiest way, the quickest way to get shit fixed.
No, I mean that was the one gripe I had about the house I just sold, was that the HVAC was in the attic and so was the hot water heater.
And there was
just two big no's.
But you did not have roof deck spray foam insulation.
Correct.
Your insulation, your water heater,
blow-in fiberglass,
blow in above the ceiling. So that was not conditioned.
Correct.
And that was actually one of the things that I mentioned when you were talking about the noise you were hearing from the highway.
Yes.
You thought, and I actually don't know if you were.
I thought it was the windows.
Yeah, and I don't actually know if you were wrong, but I definitely was like, I think the better solution is to spray foam this roof deck.
Yeah, probably.
The only noise blocker
I would have
is a piece of
definitely
plywood.
done that if I had stayed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been I agree with that. I actually think because the way that the fiberglass insulation set in, they have the soffits. The soffits are just open air. So all that noise is piping through the soffit and then coming down through the ceiling.
Yeah, one piece of sheetrock.
Or even the wall
feet.
systems too.
Yeah. Your internal wall systems have no insulation.
Right.
Oh, I guess that's a fifth type of insulation, is that rock wool, solid. But that's mostly, not only, but mostly for interior wall noise dampening.
Right.
Which, if you have the budget, you should put in every bathroom wall and your master bedroom just to keep it a little bit more quiet, especially if you have children. But that's like a budget thing, and if you're building a house, I would not recommend ripping new sheetrock down to put in insulation. That's not efficient or smart, and it will cost you a lot of money. But we're kind of having a quasi new construction conversation.
Yeah, I mean the fiberglass insulation, a lot of people talk about how dangerous asbestos is, right? Asbestos insulation used to be used a lot. But nobody really talks about how immediately dangerous fiberglass is.
That's because people are lulled with comfort when it's covered in sheetrock.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, and it's covered in sheetrock, it's not a big deal because it's not becoming airborne. But I mean, I think a lot of people go into their attic and they don't wear a mask, and then they're ruffling around fiberglass, and those glass fibers become airborne.
Yeah.
You know, they aerosolize.
Yeah.
And I think that's really dangerous to breathe.
In general,
Yeah.
I do not recommend you store stuff in an attic. It
Right.
seems to be the move for like empty suitcases, old TV boxes, Christmas decorations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Frickin' declutter your life, or build a shed, or lay down solid a plywood floor on the joists to cover that insulation. You really don't want to just be like casually up there. There's a reason every time you leave the attic, you're like, I'm kind of scratchy.
Yeah.
Guess what? It's not that hard to
Yeah.
figure out.
Well, what I saw a lot, so I mean, one of the craziest things I ever saw, you know, was just this HVAC in a Northwest DC little single family home, really small house, like maybe 1,000 square foot house, really cute. It had an attic located HVAC, and one of the return ducts was just sucking air in from the attic, and all around it was fiberglass insulation. And then on top of that,
Wait, so that means those fiberglass particulates
were all
are going
pulled
into the system
into the system, yeah.
and now being pumped through the whole
And then
house.
what was even crazier was back in the 80s, they started lining ductwork. I guess because they wanted to reduce sound movement through the ductwork, they started lining ductwork with spray glued on basically fiberglass insulation.
Now it's loose, but it's still insulation around ductwork.
Right, and that's on the outside.
Yeah.
I'm talking about they used to put this stuff on the inside of the ductwork.
Oh, that's just death.
And
You're just really giving
and
people cancer.
We were going around, and so it was even beyond that point because it was starting to collect all the dust associated with with the house.
Yeah,
You
just
know,
regular pet hair and
Yeah, you produce dust
Skin.
as a person.
Yeah.
And you also produce humidity.
yeah.
And all
Totally.
that gets sucked through. And so like over 20 years, you have nobody's cleaned it and everything. It's collected dust.
You're breathing out real hot air.
Then
it's very humid.
you've got that return sucking in moisture-laden air through the attic, and then all that moisture condenses onto that, and it looked as if, and not to be too graphic, but like literally looked like somebody got drunk and threw up all over the inside of the ductwork. It was mold
Just a perfect storm.
mold growing vertically,
Just a perfect
like
storm.
mold, mushrooms,
Oof.
like organic. It was like a tropical rainforest inside of the ductwork.
So, like, this is not savable. You need new ducts.
Yeah, the guy, the poor guy, had to, deal with it, and I consulted with him and helped him choose an HVAC contractor to come in and do it. And we made like very specific decisions about how the new system was going to be insulated, and installed so that it wouldn't happen again. And his whole family was like miserable. They were like, it was like something they had been living with forever, and there was
Like they were sick. and
literally
had-
like black mold growing out of the vent covers, as an indicator into the bedroom, so you could see, and so it was just like basically non-livable conditions. Another crazy scenario I saw to kind of storytell is I went into a very nice condo, new building, newly renovated, like right down there near the White House, like 400, like Pennsylvania, like right 2 blocks away from the White House. Prime real estate, apartment, must rent for $2,600, $3,000 a month. Probably it's like even more than that now. But back then, like in 2020, I was looking at it. And this person had just moved in. They're like, I can't even sleep the night. Like I'm like, my throat is itchy and all this stuff. And I'm normally sensitive, but like I figured this was a new building. I figured it'd be nice. So I'm like, yeah, it shouldn't be a problem. I open up the HVAC closet in this little condo, and I come to find out, I take my pocket knife out and just cut through the supply trunk of the ductwork coming vertically out of the air handler. The supply trunk was built out of fiberglass sheets, of yellow fiberglass with a foil over top of it. So it looked like foil ductwork from the outside, like a foil covered duct. It wasn't. It was fiberglass board. In other words, all the glass fibers were being shot through the system the entire time.
That can't be legal.
No, it wasn't. And it was something the inspectors of the building, they didn't catch because they never...
Because it looked like foil.
They never did what I did, which is take a pocket knife out and poke the thing to see really, and I started getting used to doing that, taking my knife and, or a flat blade screwdriver and going around and poking things like drywall or, brick mortar, or just to be able to inspect what the integrity of the specific material was. And I was standing there looking at it, and I understood the distinction of that material I was looking at between something that would be a fiberglass wrap over a sheet metal duct versus what I saw was a very flat surface, indicating to me it was some kind of foam board.
Yeah, like we talked about, like that you would put under
believe it or not,
slab.
They manufacture board that is fiberglass board. So it's a tightly packed fiberglass, but it's in a sheet, and they used it to construct the ductwork, and they taped it all together with foil mastic tape. So I turned around and I said, well, you don't have a mold problem. You have a fiberglass problem.
They made like a temporary air thing and never replaced it.
There's no air test that would show that. It's just, there's nothing that's going to show that.
That's just your experience of knowing what you're looking at.
Right, applying my experience to, that's a building material that you're generally not supposed to have inside of a livable area, and it's not safe to breathe.
He probably didn't like, or they probably didn't like that response.
She was floored.
I'm sure.
Because
she just paid $1 bajillion to live 2 blocks from the White House.
She paid probably a significant deposit and move furniture in. And she gave me a big hug. She was like, oh my gosh, I've been trying to figure this out. And I had like so many people come out and nobody could figure it out. Everybody was looking at it like, oh, what is this? And then I said, well, how many other units are like this in this entire building? There must be like 100.
I would imagine most of them, if the HVAC contractor got all the jobs,
right?
You usually don't hire a different HVAC contractor for each apartment. It's like, I need you to do the apartment building, run them all.
Right.
Yeah. So if he thought that was correct, and whenever they did it, that's all he had at Home Depot to go buy because there was a shortage on metal or whatever, or it was
obviously,
cheaper.
Constructing sheet metal ducts is not easy.
No, it's time-consuming and labor-intensive, and it's a skilled trade.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to mastic tape some fiberglass board together.
Yeah, that you cut with a mat knife. Yeah, it's very easy.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you cause people a significant amount of distress.
So what are your thoughts on building a home like I want to design, that I've designed, that has slab on grade, removing any crawl space even issues by simply not having one existing, and doing spray foam and having a mechanical room where just everything is inside the envelope?
Well, I think that's a good idea if you understand the microclimate of where you're building well enough to know that the slab, first of all, that you're building is going to be graded high enough that it won't be disturbed by any local water source or any issues like that, I think. And then the other thing too is understanding if there's any sub slab water movement, if you have a spring. So we had
how would you recommend somebody like me goes about getting that kind of information about a spring and or the microclimate? Because in my particular case, and I think we're going to go up to the land on Thursday and take a look at it, but I am not really worried about water. There's a legitimate pond. There's documented streams, not where I'm going to build.
Yeah.
The field I want to build in is a paddock that is mowed for hay for cows at the moment. The dude, I need it mowed and he needs the hay, so it's just a barter. But it's, a solid 2 to 6 feet elevation above the pond, so everything would flow there.
That's common sense, right?
So that, I think I'm good there.
Number one, apply common sense just to look at it and understand what the grading is of the whole scenario.
Yeah.
The second thing you could do is maybe consult with somebody who does soil testing and grading and excavation, because they would have a third eye on all that stuff. They see it day in and day out. They'd see it differently than you would.
Is this different than the people who soil tested for the well and septic? Or would
they would
that
probably know.
test-
They'd probably know really well because they're going to know how well the water percolates. Percolation is actually a key indicator for how well the drainage works too. On top of the sewage, and then beyond that, I think if you're able to, talk to if you're going to design in some kind of drainage scenario around what you're doing, that might be good just to make sure you got
like a foundation drain.
Yeah, foundation drain.
Yeah, so what
Like
I want to
daylights.
do is because my house is going to be a very perfect rectangle. So what I want to do, it's also going to have a single sloping shed roof.
Mhm.
So that means one long gutter on one side of the house. Because of the length, it probably won't handle two downspouts, one on each corner. There'll probably have to be a third middle one.
Yeah.
But I want to hook those 3 downspouts into 6-inch solid PVC pipe, run it. This is the back of the house. Run it to the end, run it along the short side, and run it 300 feet to that pond.
Right.
That's what I want to do.
Right.
And then I want to do the exact same thing, but the entire foundation drain with the perforated in the sock, all gravel all the way up.
Mhm.
No, not even dirt on top. Just leave it open gravel so no dirt can get in there and eventually clog it. Just gravel. Water hits the gravel, goes through the gravel, hits the pipe all the way around the house, 365 degrees, and then run that alongside that pipe 200 feet to the pond. So just like water that is falling, water that goes off the roof, and water that trickles over will all have a direction
I've
to
never
leave.
heard of 365 degrees before.
Whatever. You know what I meant. I just get excited. 365 days a year, 360 degrees.
365. I didn't know about those extra 5 degrees, Corbett.
It's only in Corbett land. When Corbett builds a house, we do 365 degrees.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue that you're going to have is the square footage of your house is a lot. Like I've been in some homes in Northern Virginia that push 10,000 square feet. And the problem that they start having is they just can't condition that much space. There's not enough HVAC in the universe to be able to adequately condition it.
I'm only conditioning 3,500 square feet.
Right.
It's not that big.
No, but it is a good amount.
Yeah,
and
but
it's something you have to factor in.
I'm sure my HVAC professionals can size it correctly.
Yeah,
because the garage is not included.
A lot of times I saw it where HVACs weren't sized correctly. They're either sized too big or too small, and that's really where that would come in. And they would build an addition, and then they wouldn't really factor that in.
Sizing too big is actually really dangerous. Most people don't realize. They're like, oh, just size it a little big. And I'm like, you don't get it. Like if you size it too big, you're just going to have moisture building where you can't see it.
Correct.
And then when you can see it, it's too late.
Yeah.
Like now we're ripping all your sheetrock because all your insulation's pulling in moisture. You got to replace all of that. Mm-hmm. That's also a really easy sign if you go into a crawl space and you don't physically see standing water and you don't notice mold and you don't notice effervescence. Look up between your floor joists. If your beautiful, fluffy, cotton candy looking insulation looks wet and compressed and sad, that's because it's grabbing water out of the air.
Or if it's falling, it's literally falling down.
Because it falls because the moisture makes it too heavy, and then it falls because it's just held up by these tiny little spring rods. It's not really held into place with a fastener.
Correct.
So that's a really easy sign. If you open the crawl space door and it's just shredded and falling, that's not it's weak and you have to swap it. That's you got a moisture problem. So address that. Yeah, absolutely. So circling back to you selling your house.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't have to dive into life circumstance beyond you lost your job. Shit happens. You got a new one. Congrats. You started in a couple weeks. It's going to be awesome for you. I know you're very excited about it and you're doing some great stuff like with your family. You're doing some small renovations in the meantime and whatever. So, we're going to keep it positive because it's more fun.
No, it is actually a positive thing. Because I ended up being able to sell the house I was in for a year, $50,000 more than what I paid. So I basically lived there for free.
No, you got paid to live there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
put a lot of work into it. So I call it even.
But I think we did the math, and you actually, even with all your work, you made 20 to 30K.
A little ahead, and then I can take an exemption for capital gains that shows that I had to physically move I had to change jobs.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
which the tech market is really on a big downturn right now. And so
It seems just jobs are on a downturn.
I'm very lucky to have landed somewhere else as well, even in a better position than before.
Yeah.
So.
And in your particular case, that 440 house, what was 490?
That's
got
what
for
we're
it?
Yeah, that's what we're selling it for.
That's what you're selling it for. So after, taxes,
Yeah.
fees, and all that baloney and
Yeah.
the money you put into it, you're going to make a nice
Yeah,
20 to 30K.
I'll
That's
pull
great.
about 90 out, and then so I put about 70 in. So yeah, I mean it kind of offsets the interest I paid on the mortgage.
Yeah, the interest was unfortunately high for you. Hopefully in a couple of years, like you
so,
talked about.
So would have renting.
Yeah.
Renting would have cost me $20,000. So, all things considered.
Yeah, I mean, that house does
well.
not rent for less than
$2,500.
I was going to say 23 to 2,400.
Right.
Yeah, because actually I got that number for you when you were thinking
Yes.
maybe you should rent it out. And it was like 22 to 24 was
Right.
really your top end because you are, in my opinion, I love Durham and I don't mind a lot of the things that people claim are negatives, but you're a little closer to the highway.
Yes.
It's not the best ideal situation location.
It was nice in the sense there was a lot of noise from the highway and a lot of people doing stuff.
Yeah.
Just being Durham.
But 9 minutes from downtown is pretty great.
It was so convenient for me to be able to I could get to Cary in 20 minutes.
Yeah, because you could get on the highway.
I could get on the highway in 2 minutes. I could get to downtown in 7 minutes. So it was actually that's why I chose it because of that location. I thought it was convenient.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I mean, we basically live in the same part of Durham, and our access to the highway is the same, and our distance to downtown, mine might be 2 minutes further away. But, I mean, I took an Uber on St. Patrick's Day. It was $9.60 to get to downtown Durham. And I was like, okay, that's cheaper than gas and parking. Like, at the end of the day, I was like, and if I want to have a drink on St. Patrick's, which I did, then I don't have to drive home. Like, it's like, okay, at some point, it just doesn't make any sense.
What'd you drink on St. Patrick's Day?
I don't really drink, so I had my standard 2 whiskeys.
Oh, were they green?
They were not. So we attempted to meet new friends from we being my girlfriend Jen and I. We attempted to meet 2 new friends from my kickball team at the Irish of Irish, Bull McCabe's in downtown Durham, which is a fantastic spot for those who are wondering why this story leads to us not making it. It has nothing to do with Bull McCabe's. By the time we finished our afternoon kayaking and then hit them up on the group chat, they were like, oh, it was so crowded. We got our 2 beers and we bounced and we're home. And Jen and I looked at each other like, well, we really wanted to hang out with familiar people as people who don't like to just drink to drink. Going to a bar like that is not our vibe when our people are not there to hang out with. If that makes sense. So we said, screw it. We called an audible. We went to the boot room. Fantastic sandwiches for people who are curious about the boot room in downtown Durham, across from the Q Shack. Also amazing barbecue. And then we finally get in contact with them and they're like, yeah, we're home. Mike sent his husband Jeff to go get spirits or something, and they're like, "You're welcome to come hang out on the patio with us." And we were like, "Oh, we're at the boot room," and they're like, "Oh, we're around the corner. Our house is 6 minutes away." And we're like, "Okay, we're finishing. We're on our way." So we end up just going and hanging out at their place, and Jeff he's got this full bar set up with these fermented cherries, and he was making what are they called? Is it old fashions? Whatever it is, it's just whiskey with a little cherry and whatever. And it was just he was going all out with his little shaker thing. He looked like a pro bartender. And I was like, I really don't drink, but you guys are such gracious hosts. And if you're going to have one, I'll have one. And that led to 2. And then next thing you know, we're making dumplings at 10 o'clock at night and playing Mario Kart. And it was just a lot of fun. So I had my 2 drinks every 3 months that night. Because I'm not a big drinker. You're more of a beer guy, right?
Yeah.
No.
I like my IPAs.
Yeah, they're so gross to me. I don't get it. Yeah. I had a friend who brought over non-alcoholic IPAs. And I was just like, wait a minute. That's disgusting, bitter, gross brown water, and it doesn't even get you drunk. I'm really missing the point. I just couldn't get it.
It's like the other day I was standing in Lowe's looking at tile, and they make tile that looks like hardwood floors. And I turn around and they
make
now
hardwood
they
floor
make
looks like
now,
tile.
They now make LVP that looks like tile. It's like, what? Where am I right now? What universe am I living in?
Yeah, all of the different materials are transitioning into the other materials.
Right.
It's
like,
crazy.
why do I want tile that looks like hardwood floors?
Or wood
Why?
that looks like tile. It's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Why don't we just use the thing
Why
that
don't we
is the
just
thing,
use the thing
that
that's
looks
the
like the
thing?
thing? Yeah,
Right.
it's true. It's very interesting. Yeah, it is pretty crazy. Yeah, because you're looking at tile for this bathroom you're gonna live in. Basically.
So my folks have a pretty sweet house in Frederick, Maryland, and the basement is totally unfinished. So I came home and I was like, why don't we just we sat down, we put together a plan. We're thinking about selling that house in like maybe 2 to 3 years. And we just looked at the bathrooms in the whole house, and they're just disgusting. They're original 1994.
But did you waterproof the basement first?
And yes, so we actually had some foundation cracks that formed. It was a poured concrete slab foundation, and the basement is 8 feet, like 6 to 8 feet below grade. So we actually had some cracks that we had to take care of, and we used a Sika product, Sika Crack Fix. And then on top of that, I got a Loctite concrete urethane that I put over top of that, and that has actually seemed to do a really good job of. So we just had these minor leaks, like little tiny thing where you could literally throw a towel down and be after a big rainstorm, like a towel's worth of water would come through. So it wasn't a big deal, but it's still something that we definitely wanted to resolve before we obviously nail down the bottom plates and start building framing walls and so forth.
Yeah, I definitely. Yeah, you got to take your own advice there for sure.
Yeah,
I've gotten a couple of calls here with awful like moisture foundation issues, and I've done all of it, honestly. I've subbed out all of it. I don't do any of this stuff. I'm too big for most of the foundations here because they are legitimately crawl spaces. They are not basements. Basements are not really a thing here. But like we've gone in and the guy was like, look, I know what's up. I'm a realtor. I've got the budget for a vapor barrier and a sub pump. And I was like, cool. I've got 2 laborers and a licensed plumber. Let's make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've had people who are like, we need the Monty. And we'll be like, okay, for $9,000, we will dig all the way around your foundation on the outside, put the pipe.
That's way too good of a price for that.
Well, it's a very small house, and it's not.
I've
It's
seen
what it costs.
projects we did. I wasn't involved, but no, I guess I was involved.
You're comparing DC price, though.
No,
it's not
yeah,
fair.
I know. We did a Cabin John. We did a house in Cabin John, and I think the waterproofing bill was $65,000.
Yeah, see, that's disgusting
Which
and
is
not
just-
appropriate. And that dude probably put $20,000 in his pocket.
Yes,
Yeah, see, that's not, to me, that's immoral. But
I hear you. Well,
for me, I
that's
was
why
like,
you're a great contractor.
well, I appreciate you saying that, but it's also just like how I was raised. There's like what it should cost, and then there's like, especially a person, it's like, they're moving into their own house.
Well, they justify it because they warranty everything. So they're like basically saying that if there's a problem in 10 years, they'll come back and deal with it.
Yeah, if there's a problem in 10 years, I will deal with it, but there'll be a bill.
Yes.
So I guess that's the difference.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I am not responsible for just the earth shifting and cracks happening 10 years down the
nature
road.
doing
That's
things.
not, I can't, like, if you want to hold me responsible
Yeah.
for that, that's not rational.
Right.
Yeah. If
Well-
I put in a pipe and it was held together by duct tape.
I dealt with
That's
a
different.
lot of irrational scenarios. with
Yeah.
mold, involving mold, and the people like that would be dealing with it.
Well, mold is a
they would
different
just be-
scenario because mold has has two big factors working for it. You scare the shit out of people. People scare the shit out of themselves.
Yes.
And then also, it's a specialized field with a specialized certification. So people get to kind of walk in with their certification and be like, it costs your firstborn, your spare kidney, and
Right.
$85,000.
Right.
And there's no one else can do it but me.
Well, yeah.
Obviously, I'm
We
exaggerating.
tried to take a lot of that pain out of the situation. I tried to really talk to people pretty, just be real with people about what it was and if they could do something about it themselves, then I would tell them how. and I'd write down a whole plan on how they could do it. If they were DIY kind of people, if they didn't want to deal with it, they wanted to hire a professional, I'd give them a plan. I'd give them my price. And sometimes they'd turn around with the plan I wrote them and they'd hire someone cheaper. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, because you got paid to make the plan.
Yeah.
You get an inspection fee.
We would charge inspection fees because that's time. And
yeah.
My time was, worth something.
Absolutely. So, I charge $100 to give accurate estimates for people.
I think that's a really good deal.
Yeah. I know it's a really good deal.
Especially given, like, last night, we were at that networking event and just watching how much knowledge you have about things. Like, you could save people $1,000 with that $100
easily.
Yeah, and we oftentimes did that where we'd come in and some other company would come in and be like, "Oh, you need $5,000 worth of stuff." We'd come in, charge our inspection fee, which in the DC area is between like $300 and $400, and we would save people that easily.
Yeah, because you'd be like, you actually only need $1,800 worth of shit.
Right.
So 18 plus 4 is still 22. It's half of what he said.
Yeah.
That's what I like to tell people too.
And you're able to sleep at night now. Because
I like to tell people the same thing, because a lot of times a company is giving you a price, but it's like it's an average price based on square footage usually.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, your bathroom is this much square footage, so it costs this much money. And I'll walk in and I'll go, we're not doing anything with 90% of your bathroom. Square footage is irrelevant. You want the tile redone. Right. I need one tile guy to come in here and measure the tile. Then you buy whatever tile you want, and here's a labor price. And it's a third of what that dude just said, because he measured your bathroom square footage and went, we have this times square footage is our price. And that's how they can pump out really quick
quotes
estimates for free.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm like, wait a minute, I need to go and measure, and I need to call the 5 people who are going to do this job: the plumber, the HVAC if needed, the electric if needed, the flooring if needed, the tile if needed.
You put together an actual quote, and that was the thing that we started realizing was that's how we differentiated ourselves from a lot of other contractors. Was they would use these systems like on an iPad, and they would have line item prices for all this stuff. But it's not a you can't. There's no one size fits all solution to every single problem, especially when it comes to complicated stuff like the convergence of HVAC, the convergence of waterproofing, and then, mold and et cetera. So we would write custom scopes of work. Every single job was a custom scope of work with line items for every single detail. And sometimes I would include square footage as just a reference, but it wasn't something I used as a multiplier ever, because that would just never work. There is no multiplier that exists that works.
100%.
And that's why a lot of people went with us. I mean, there was one point, at least before COVID hit, I was like 7 or 8 for 10 on, proposals that I would pump out, just because mine were actually detailed and provided prices that were appropriate to each scenario.
Yeah. See, when I give somebody a bid, it is not pending any more decisions. It is like, this is what it will cost.
Right.
Other builders will be like, here's a price, and then here's 4 cabinet options at different prices, add that price on. It's like, wait a minute, now I got to pick one and then factor that in. It's like, oh, here's the 4 tiles we offer. We didn't work that into the price either. Pick that, and that. And it's like, wait a minute, that's not a price then. That's 80% of a price. Whereas for me, it's like, here is what it's going to cost, and here's a note at the bottom that says, does not include the tile. Go pick whatever tile you want, because you have to stare at it. And I don't mark up tile. Go buy the tile from Best Tile. Pick your color. Pick your grout. Guess what? I can buy it and you can pay me, or you can buy it. It's going to be the same price. Right. So I'm, and like light fixtures, same thing. I'm not picking your light fixtures. If I pick one that I like and you don't like it,
right,
and then I put it in flawlessly because I paid my licensed electrician to do it, and then you don't like it, you should have guess what? We don't ever do that.
Right.
I'll tell you, you need 3 fans.
These
Go
are
pick
all
the 3 fans.
Really important things that you learn when you become a contractor, because it's basically covering your side of the business, and we had to do a lot of that too. We had a lot of exclusionary things, like we never dealt with floors. We would remove flooring and we would dispose of it, but we never reinstalled floors unless it was a part of some bigger restoration deal where I could sub it out. But I always excluded, like I always had basically an entire page of exclusions.
It seems like it's just a smart way to cover your ass.
Well, yeah, but it's also kind of makes people think about the scope of the work and what's involved. A lot of people don't understand when they go to hire a contractor what's included or involved. And they just think, oh, well, that's, wow, okay, $10,000 to do the basement. No, that's just $10,000 to like gut 1,000 square feet of materials. And then it's probably going to cost you 10 to 15 to put everything back together.
Yeah, if you want to rebuild it out
at minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's another, I mean, your note about a custom scope of work is pretty important. It's like, even for me, just sending a text message to a client that's like, hey, thanks for having me out last week. I got the numbers back. It's $9,000. That includes this, that, the third. You've got to buy the handles and the dishwasher.
Right.
Like that's very, very clear. Like, you brought me out there to move a washer and dryer. We got to cut open 2 sections of wall where the washer and dryer was. You want countertop and a cabinet. You want a dishwasher installed. So plumber's got to get in there to remove the washer and dryer stuff and add dishwasher stuff. And then in the new room, add plumbing stuff. Electrician's got to deal with both. And then we got to repatch, re-sheetrock, mud, and paint. And it's like, okay, so to do this turnkey, that's that. But like, I'm not picking out your dishwasher.
Right.
You got to go pick one. You can buy a $200 one that's used, or you could buy an $18,000 one by Melee. Like, I don't care.
Right.
You can get a Milwaukee brand one for all I give a shit, but they go in the same and they're all the same size. So you just go buy one. You want it to match what's in your kitchen? That's on you. And then we're putting in a cabinet that has 4 drawers. So I was like, you got to buy the 4 handles. I wrote parentheses. I suggest you try to match them. But if you want 4 decorative handles, it's the same labor for me to drill the holes and screw on the handle. I'm not going to pick them.
We always require people to supply finished paint.
Finished paint.
If they supplied it, we would always just do it.
Yeah.
For free, basically, depending on the job. Like, most of the times we were doing little remediation restoration scenarios where it's like one wall in a basement in the front of the house where it gets all the water. And we cut out the bottom 4 feet, clean everything, put new insulation back, correct the water problem, put the drywall back, mud it, primer, and if there's finished paint there, we'll put it on. But like, we're not going to color match.
I'm not going to go buy it.
No. You have to buy the finished paint. If you don't supply it, then we just don't put it on. We'll prime the walls. That's it.
I mean, I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so like in this case, I was just mentioning the $700 that I'm going to give my sheetrocker. That will include him buying enough sheetrock to cover the patches we make, the tape, the mud, the screws.
Yeah.
Scrap 2x4s for screw backing.
Right.
And he will take a piece of the old wall and go get it color matched at Sherwin-Williams and buy the paint and bring it back and do the whole Monty. So to me, that is worth more than $700. I'm happy to give him that money to do, and basically it will be turnkey, beautiful, like we never made a hole in the wall, But that's what this client needs. This is not a basement. This has to look like it was always there,
right?
And we've got to cut, almost 4 foot by 4 foot holes in the wall have to be removed so that we can get, a new drain line for the dishwasher and a new drain line for the relocated washer and dryer. That dishwasher box, my electrician needs to run a 220 for the dryer. Like, there's significant guts that have to be arranged. Luckily, this is all first floor and there's a crawl space, so we can just go.
I mean, the plumbing's a little different,
Yeah. It's luckily, because like I said, first floor with a crawl space, it's pretty easy. He can just like cut the old one, put in a T and run to the new spot and go up. And my electrician can just he's got the whole crawl space to run a wire that's an inch thick. Yeah. But if it was second floor, things get real complicated real fast, because now you're cutting the sheetrock of the wall where it goes, the sheetrock of the ceiling underneath.
Yeah.
Trying to guess which way the joists go. Oh, we can't cut a hole big enough through this joist because it's load bearing, and we need to put a 3-inch drain line, and things get real complicated real fast.
Yep. Real
complicated real fast. Yeah. So, It's been interesting, though, hearing your perspective, both like you basically are a contractor. You were just working under your dad's license. You were doing the same stuff. You just weren't building new houses.
I mean,
same shit.
Some of the biggest, I think it did, like the biggest project I ever did was probably approaching 60 to 70,000.
It's a huge job.
Yeah. And I did probably, at least 10 of those in the 3-year period that we were working together, and then we did numerous, probably 120 to $30,000 jobs, because that was kind of the sweet number for remediating and restoring a basement.
Right.
Just like the most common thing, most common scenario is just like, oh my gosh, our basement flooded, or, there's Penicillium aspergillus, the high humidity just sustained itself too long. And,
yeah.
So yeah.
Well, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, you got all those old, original, real stone foundations.
Yeah.
The mortar
they just
disintegrates.
they just allow moisture transfer so easily, and it doesn't have anywhere to go. And it's honestly became so overwhelming to me that I made a decision to go back into tech, because I just felt like I was running around DC in a pickup truck with my hair on fire, throwing dehumidifiers in basements everywhere, and trying to educate as many people as I could, but just dealing with the frustration associated with what they were dealing with, because they would be frustrated.
So it sounds like you kind of let their frustrations bleed over into your psyche a little bit.
I did.
Yeah. And you felt their pain.
I did. I felt a
fixer.
lot of their pain, even though, and then, and it would make some people really kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Like irrational. Because it was a very stressful life thing that they were going through. It's like, well, I didn't make the mold. God made the mold.
I mean, I'm laughing at the God part, but I mean, I get it of being stressed. I mean, I don't have kids, but if I had one, I'm assuming I would kill everyone to protect that kid. So if all of a sudden there's mold in my house and I'm worried about my newborn safety,
Yeah.
you get very fight or flight, defensive, angry at, why me, why us, why now, right as I've had a kid, blah, blah, blah.
Well,
so
because you
I
decided
understand
to have kids and live inside of Washington, D.C., which I
right,
would
but we're
never
not going to
do.
criticize humans for life choices. We're just going to be like, we're just going to try to comprehend the
Right.
ability to understand that they are very frustrated with,
Yeah.
having a kid is probably the most stressful thing on the planet.
Yeah.
it's
And
hard and it's important
so
and
is
whatever.
owning a home.
So is owning a home.
Yeah, particularly a home that is,
100 years old.
over 100 years old, that's sitting on top of infrastructure that is over 200 years old.
Yeah, on
by
top
the
of a
way.
water table.
On top of a swamp.
Yeah.
Inside of a swamp.
Okay, have you ever seen legitimate wood tree trunks used in foundation?
No.
Because we've seen that here.
Oh, okay.
Like one time, it should have been, like a cement footer and then cinder block stack to wood floor joist. It was literally it was literally a cement footer and a 3-foot wide original tree trunk.
Nice.
And they just shoved it. It was probably from a tree they ripped from that site.
Little Keebler elves probably lived in that thing.
Probably. Yeah. I've also seen a car rim as a foundation support. Yeah.
That's I hadn't seen that before. I've seen plenty
Yeah.
of tires in crawl spaces.
No, I haven't seen any tires like the rubber.
Yeah.
No. This was like a legit metal rim, and it was taking the place of a stack of cinder blocks for like a pier for a foundation. I'd never seen anything like it in my life.
That's interesting.
I was like, where am I? I'm in the Twilight Zone. Also, this particular house, you're looking at me. I'm very big. You would not have been able to fit in the crawl space. I specifically had to hire people who were not insulation people to crawl in there. I was like, you're the smallest humans I know. If I buy you insulation and these metal things, will you take care of it? And on your way out, lay a vapor barrier? And they were like, yeah, okay, sure. Because my insulation installers were like, you need to get in there with shovels and give us more room. And I was like, I'm not doing that. Not doing that.
We had that challenge all the time, was just the clearance of getting into a tight space like that and being able to safely send somebody in there.
Yep.
Yep. And people just had a hard time, understanding that, especially with like one of the things I saw all the time was these rear additions on the houses where they basically would just build a deck, and then it would become, it's like it would start as a deck, and then eventually somebody would be like, I want a sunroom, and then they'd build a sunroom, and then eventually it was like, I want the sunroom to be an extension of my kitchen.
Yep. And then they condition it.
Yeah. And then they sell the house, and some guy buys the house, and then all of a sudden he's like, well, smells weird in this room, and I don't understand why. It's like, well, because basically your floorboards are at this point just sitting on the earth.
It's just a deck board. There's
Yeah,
no
it's just a deck
seal.
and he's like, well, what can we do about it? Well, we can take the entire structure down and rebuild it, or rip up the floorboards, and cut them out in sections and try and clean and treat everything within it. Oh, well, how much is that going to cost? Man, I have no idea. A lot.
Yeah. That's not easy. That's actually really hard, because you need a shockingly large amount of temporary support systems just to hold up the walls and roof.
Right.
And then you're talking about
a lot
ripping
of
out
times
decking to
there's
then
like
dig
roof
down,
issues too,
do
and
footers.
Yeah. I mean,
it's a lot.
And a lot of times they would be really shoddily built, like they'd use like smaller dimension lumber, or
Like 3x2s.
Yeah, it'd be like
like the studs they make trailers out of.
Yeah, and the roof would be the transition from the primary house roof to the like new roof.
Just like a piece of rubber.
Terribly done. And then all the rake trim and everything would just be rotting. So it just kind of came down. It was like, well, you can spend a lot of money ripping up the floor, but like you basically just need to take this whole structure down and rebuild it. And they're like, well, how much is that? It's like, I don't know. Like,
I'm not a demo guy.
Probably $60,000 minimum, and you get the same result as what you had before, which is just thrown together.
Yeah. We see a lot of issues here where like people do exactly what you said, and it might not even be shoddy building, but they just didn't do it with a permit. So then there becomes like a big issue with, the real estate transaction. And it's like, okay, do we get to list this square footage or not? Or do we list it and then put parentheses, built without a permit? And it's like, I'm not a realtor, but I have realtor friends, as you could imagine. And it's definitely like it's a weird, sticky, gray situation, and then I have clients who are like, hey, I want to do this without a permit, but my realtor tells me this. And I'm like, well, your realtor's right. You should just get a permit. Like, what's the holdup with a permit? And they're like, oh, I don't want to waste the time and the money. And I'm like, the time and the money? I was like, you're not ready to build. Submit a permit now. It's like not even $1,000 to get all the permits. Like, what are you talking about? Like, at the end of the day, there are certain things municipalities want permits for. F off. I'm not getting a permit to change a fan. Okay? Unscrew the fan, put the new fan up. Okay? Screw you, municipality. But if you want a deck, get a deck permit. It's quick. Get a couple $100, get a deck permit. It's not that complicated. It's really not that complicated. If you're trying to put an extension on your home without a permit, you are arguably stupid.
Yeah.
It's just not smart. There's things you don't know how to do. Like, I don't care if you hire a licensed plumber. He will unintentionally miss something that the inspector would catch, and then he'll fix it. You want the inspections.
Yeah. We never really took on anything where we had to do permitting, and thank goodness, because...
Well, you're different. You're specialized.
I mean, like, DC wasn't easy to deal with that.
Also, you are the permit just by kind of having the mold certification for your specific trade. You're like, we don't need a permit to rip out the moldy shit. Just rip it out.
Right. Well, it depended. If it became structural, or load bearing, then but then we were involving somebody even bigger.
You need an engineer,
We never took on anything more than we always only took on things that we felt comfortable that we could do for people, and we always wanted to just be fair and honest about what we were going to do.
It's funny how you say that, and to you and me, it's a duh, but it is a very big issue in the construction industry as a whole, just the general lack of knowledge. There's a huge knowledge gap between the people who do the work and the people who need the work done.
Yes.
And most people who are getting the work done feel that they have been mistreated or overcharged.
Yeah.
And it's happening a lot, yes, but a lot of times they're being charged the correct amount, and there's just a lack of understanding of what is really happening and why that dollar amount matters.
Well, it takes a lot. I guess my big frustration, and like I moved down here because I wanted kind of like a slower pace of life and so forth, out of the DC area. But like my biggest frustration as a young contractor trying to break in to help the DC market was that I felt like I really couldn't afford to even have the facilities that I needed to be able to do the jobs that other people needed me to do. So in order to be a contractor, you have to have a vehicle that's capable of, transporting tools and equipment. You have to have a facility like a garage to be able to store all that stuff and store materials. If you're like gearing up for a job, and so when you look at the housing, like just north of the DC metro area is what they call the I-270 corridor. And I had a townhouse up there, and like the average house with just a little tiny garage is like a minimum of $500,000, which on a single income, for young 20-something is pretty hard to swing unless you've got something coming, unless you're like you've saved a lot. So I always felt like, to me, people, like I would give them a quote and it would be like to gut a basement or something, it'd be like 15. They're like, well, I would thought it'd be like 7 or 8. It's like, well, I have to pay for, this vehicle and it's very expensive. And then the insurance is very expensive. And then all the gas to be able to get in. And then once I'm inside of DC, there's no Home Depot there unless I drive like 30 minutes. And then once I gather all the trash from gutting the basement, I can't just throw it away on the street. I have to then haul it to a landfill. And usually the landfill would be like in another state, so the logistics, the planning, the facilities, being able to have all the tools, like that's all of that stuff adds up really fast.
And none of that is seen by the client.
Right.
They just see
and then on top
the work
of that,
you did.
Having the specialization requires you to keep up with licensing and pay even 2 to 3 times as much as a regular contractor pays in insurance. Our prices were definitely higher, but like we also had a burn rate, even just, running a small crew, and like me and my dad, our burn rate, I think, was about $22,000 a month. So I would get up every day and I would literally be like, I have to make $1,000 today to keep the lights on. 2, if I want to pay my own bills, the burn rate of just keeping the lights on of running a specialized contracting business in the DC area was like between $20,000 and $30,000 a month.
Yeah,
to
my
be able to
my
deliver.
burn rate is almost 0, just because I'm
because you have
robbing out of a home. I'm a home office guy.
Yeah,
with
you
a
have
home
a nice
garage
house
guy,
with a good garage,
and I have no employees.
This is $1 million setup at like an hour north of DC. This is $1 million.
If you can even find it with this much land.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But also that's it's by design though. Let's be very clear. Like I knew buying this house, I was like, this is not a car garage. This is going to be a wood shop.
Sure.
And then I immediately made plans for a carport.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. And then I knew that, like, okay, at the time, the gym was a guest room. I was like, this 3rd bedroom is always going to be an office. I didn't know I was starting a podcast, but it was very easy to work that into this office as we're sitting here with plenty of space and enjoying this podcast. And then by design, I have no employees, and I don't think I ever will. I have subs because when I need them, they're available. And when I don't have a job, they can go work for someone else and get paid.
That's the way we did things too.
Yeah.
Because, when you have that kind of relationship, you don't have to worry. And then the other thing too is the payroll. It's expensive to have a payroll.
Which I don't have.
It's also expensive to have workers' comp and health insurance.
Right, which I don't have to have.
Yeah.
I don't even need a bookkeeper.
Right.
Like literally I got this money from a client, this much went to materials, this much went to labor, and that's all I need to send to my tax professional.
There's actually, like, if the franchise, I think the franchise is that these big companies like ServPro, ServiceMaster, I think a lot of them really started struggling through COVID because they lost a lot of their business, and then they still had those really high reoccurring expenses like the health insurance, the workers'
office
comp,
space.
the office space, and so that really ended up hurting them. And so then their cash reserves,
Vanished.
It's
true.
And then the insurance companies on top of that are getting even tighter, about everything. So we were at the point where we never took insurance jobs because the insurance company would just nickel and dime every single thing, or they would just take forever to pay. It'd take like 90 days to pay. So we do go and do a job and spend like $3,000-$4,000 on materials and labor and everything, and then not get recouped for that for like 3 months.
See, I just won't do insurance jobs.
We just didn't.
Yeah,
I have
one person who was like, could you talk to my insurance company about the problems with the foundation?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I will talk to them on your behalf as much as you would like. I don't think it will help at all.
Right.
And they were like, okay, well, like, what if they'll do like a payment, blah, 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 some schedule? And I was like, I'm not even interested. I was like, if you want me to do this job, it's $5,000 to start and it's $5,000 at the end. I'm not dealing with the insurance company with the money at all. I'm just simply not interested.
We would document things pretty well so that people could submit everything to insurance and then get reimbursed, but we would never work directly with the insurance company for payment.
Yeah, I just won't do it.
Because it was just always a nightmare, and they never had the best interest. I mean, it's sad because they just never had the best interest for their customers.
Yeah, which is strange with how much money we pay for insurance.
Right.
Yeah, that they'd care a little bit. Yeah.
I think they do when it comes to like roofs.
They care when you pay them. They don't care as much when when they got to pay you.
Yeah, that whole thing, I don't know. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on there with, like hail storm chasers and stuff like that.
Yeah, I watched seemingly everybody I knew get somebody to inspect their roof, say there was hail damage.
Yes.
Then they'd get a check for way more than the roof costs.
Yeah.
Then they'd replace the roof, have money for a new deck, and it cost them nothing. And I'm like, what is happening? And then I had somebody inspect my roof, and they were like, your roof is too good for an insurance claim. I wouldn't do it. And I'm like, how is everybody else getting away with this? Like, what's going on? I was like, if I give you a hammer, can you like make some hail dents? Like, what do I do? Like, I want a new freaking roof, but like, it just did. She was like, the next hailstorm, call me. I'll get up here and do another inspection. I was like, okay, I'll wait for a once in a lifetime North Carolina hailstorm, the year we got 0 snow, which is apparently, according to what I saw on Facebook, which is probably not accurate, the only year in history North Carolina's never gotten snow is this year.
There's snow in Asheville in the mountains, right?
Okay, maybe it was the triangle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was the triangle.
Snow in the triangle. Yeah. Okay, well.
Every year I've been here, we've gotten at least a dusting.
You're at sea level. What do you want?
No, we're not.
Where are we at?
I don't know, but when you drive to the sea, it gets lower.
Okay. We're at 500 feet above sea
We're
level.
not very high, though.
Right.
Obviously, the Asheville, the other direction, you start climbing. Yeah.
That'd be the biggest thing I miss about living down here is that it is just warm all the time.
Yeah,
I like warmth and I like sweating.
I don't mind warmth, but I'll tell you, build a fence in the middle of August. It's not
different
great.
Story.
It can be tough.
Grueling.
It's a different kind of heat.
Right.
But framing in January is very nice because you need a fleece, and you're like, okay, I'm good. It's fucking 55 degrees in the middle of January. I mean, my birthday is in 5 days, and I'm normally like surrounded by snow and ice in New York. And I'm like, okay, we should barbecue or something. We should hang out outside today. Like, it's crazy. We were talking about kayaking tomorrow, and it's March.
Mm-hmm.
It's insane.
Right.
Yeah, it is insane. But global warming's a myth. Don't worry about it.
Oh, I mean, yeah, climate change is real, and we are definitely seeing the impact of that as it does a lot to housing. It's ultimately changing the way that we build and the way that we live in our housing.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean,
what kind of building changes?
Well, I think one of the things that we started seeing, at least my father tells me this because he feels like he's seen it over his lifetime, is that the intensity of storms is much greater, particularly up in Maryland and like DC. We would get these storms where like we'd get 3 inches of rainfall in like an hour, something like that. And the density of the rainfall was so heavy that it would impact the systems for the water management much beyond, anything that you could deal with.
So you have to oversize everything to handle that one storm.
Yeah, that's like an hour.
Interesting.
And so, I mean, we kind of chalk that up to, climate change, in just the sense that the weather patterns are changing. There's increased temperature, increased humidity, and then on top of that, you've got homes that have, been dealing with it for decades. So they just get to the point where the building materials just can't hold up anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that there are few 500-year-old houses.
Mm-hmm.
They're gone.
Yes.
Also, before houses, most of humanity did not, I would assume, based on the history we think we know, it was more cave living than building a house or building giant pyramids out of stone that have stood the test of time.
Moldy mud huts.
Moldy mud huts don't last very long.
No.
Yeah.
They get washed away in the rain.
We should all just build those Civil War log cabins with the hay and the mud between the
Yes.
wood beams, and we'll just, we'll only live to 40 and everything will be easier.
Live to 40.
40. I feel like that was old.
Yeah.
Back then.
I got 9 more years.
You got 9? Okay.
Yeah.
In a week will only have 7. So shit. I better make the most of these 7 years, man. Let's go build some shit.
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, Alex, I really appreciate the friendship we've built and you volunteering and coming on the podcast. And I wish you nothing but the best of luck in the Maryland area with this new job. And hopefully you find your way back down south.
Yeah, I'll be coming back down to visit. And maybe I can have me on again some other time.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back. Awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming. And thanks for listening, everybody. We won't do your... Normally I have people like shout out their social medias and stuff like that, but you're kind of doing a job and not really doing mold stuff. And no one in North Carolina is going to hire you.
I want to turn off all my social media.
Probably a good idea.
You could check out our business, which is RTS Environmental Services. If you're in the D.C., Maryland area, we don't care to go to Virginia anymore. You can get an inspection for mold or asbestos. Those are the services that we offer now.
Yeah, and if you're not in their servicing area, you can look them up just to get some education.
Yeah.
I'm sure their website's
pretty
cool.
We know people, and we have some articles on that website, rtsenviro.com.
Enviro.
Yeah.
Okay.
dcmoldexpert.com.
dcmoldexpert.com.
Yep.
Okay.
Got some articles. We got blog posts and various things.
Awesome.
Up there that talk about what mold is and what common issues you can find in the built environment.
Yeah, and if you're a homeowner, that's good education, because then when you see something, you won't have to like freak out, because you'll have a little bit of knowledge, and you'll also have a resource that you can go back to.
Right.
And really understand what you're looking at, and at least know that, like, okay, maybe this isn't life and death. Let's just get it fixed.
Yeah, and you give us a call, 800-722-5589.
There you go.
And ask us questions. We're happy to help. Awesome.
Well, I'm sure everybody will take advantage of that. I might be one of those people who text you directly when I see a mold problem. And as always, of course, check out CRS Contracting and the
CRSbuilds.com.
CRSbuilds.com. Yes,
Yeah.
Fantastic new website that is up. That's CRSbuilds with an S.com. The Orange Hammer podcast and CRS Contracting are on Instagram, social, all the socials really. Instagram, Facebook. We've got LinkedIn. Check out the YouTube page, putting up a lot of fun videos of me building stuff in the garage and doing work for people. We're starting to video everything I can. And if you need me for work or want to come on the show, 845-489-6057 or Corb, C-O-R-B, at WSDG.com. All right. Thanks. Bye, everybody.